She climbed into his car, threw her bags down, and said 5 words that would haunt her forever. "Driver, just go. I'm late." She didn't look at him, not once. To her, he was invisible. Just another stranger behind a wheel, just another face she would forget by morning. But here's the thing about assumptions. They have a way of unraveling at the worst possible moments. And what she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that the man sitting in that driver's seat was worth more than every building she had ever walked past in this city. He was a billionaire, a self-made titan who had built an empire from nothing. And tonight, for reasons only he understood, he was driving alone through the rain-soaked streets of the city he owned. She treated him like he was beneath her notice. She spoke to him like he didn't matter. And he said nothing, not a single word in his own defense. He just watched her through the rearview mirror with those calm, observing eyes. And he drove. But by the time that ride was over, by the time the sun rose on a brand new day, both of their lives would be changed forever. Because sometimes the person you overlook is exactly the person you need. And sometimes the lowest moment of your life is actually the beginning of everything. Have you ever dismissed someone without a second thought, only to realize later that they were the answer to a prayer you didn't even know you were praying? Have you ever been so caught up in your own pain that you missed the miracle standing right in front of you? If you believe that life has a way of putting the right people in your path at exactly the right time, then hit that subscribe button right now and settle in. Because this story, this journey of heartbreak and hope, of assumptions shattered and love discovered, this one is going to stay with you long after it ends. This is the story of a woman who mistook a millionaire for a taxi driver. He said nothing, and he drove her home. But what happened next, nobody saw coming. Let's begin. 3 hours before that fateful car ride, Vivian Ashford stood in front of a bathroom mirror, adjusting her blazer for the 15th time. The fluorescent lights hummed above her, casting harsh shadows across her face. She looked tired. She knew she looked tired. The kind of tired that no amount of concealer could hide. But tonight, exhaustion was a luxury she couldn't afford to show. Tonight was everything. She had spent 3 years clawing her way up from the bottom of Morrison and Clark architecture. 3 years of late nights and early mornings. 3 years of being overlooked and underestimated. 3 years of watching less talented people get promoted while she was told to wait her turn. But tonight, her turn had finally come. She had been invited to present her design for the Centennial Project, a revolutionary mixed-use development that would reshape the entire downtown skyline. It was the kind of project that made careers, the kind of project that transformed unknown junior architects into names that mattered. And her design was flawless. She knew it was flawless. She had poured every ounce of her creativity, every sleepless night, every sacrifice into those blueprints. This wasn't just a building. It was a vision, a statement, a declaration of everything she believed architecture could be. She took a deep breath and stared at her reflection. "You've earned this," she told herself. "You fought for this. Now go in there and take it." The boardroom was cold. That was the first thing she noticed when she walked in. Cold in temperature and cold in atmosphere. The senior partners sat around a long mahogany table like judges waiting to deliver a verdict. Their faces were unreadable. Their eyes were assessing. At the head of the table sat Richard Donovan, the founding partner whose approval meant everything. Beside him was Gregory Marshall, her mentor, the man who had promised to champion her work, the man who had told her just last week that this presentation would change everything. She trusted him. She believed him. She had no reason not to. Vivian set up her presentation with steady hands. She connected her laptop to the projector. She arranged her notes. And when everything was ready, she began. For 20 minutes, she poured her heart out to that room. She walked them through every detail of her design. The sustainable materials, the community spaces, the way natural light would flood through the atrium at different times of day. She spoke about how this building wouldn't just occupy space but would transform the way people experienced urban living. She was passionate. She was precise. She was everything she had trained herself to be. And when she finished, she looked around the room, waiting for the validation she had earned. Silence. Richard Donovan leaned back in his chair and exchanged a glance with the partner beside him. Then he spoke, and his words fell like stones into still water. "It's ambitious, I'll give you that." The way he said ambitious didn't sound like a compliment. It sounded like a diagnosis. Perhaps too ambitious for our current portfolio direction. We're looking for something more aligned with our established aesthetic. Something safer. Vivian felt her stomach drop. With all due respect, Mr. Donovan, the market is shifting. People want innovation. They want spaces that inspire them, not just contain them. Another partner shook his head slowly. Innovation is a risk we're not prepared to take right now. Thank you for your presentation, Miss Ashford. We'll be going in a different direction. She turned to Gregory, her mentor, the man who had believed in her. He was staring at the table. He wouldn't meet her eyes. He said nothing, not one word in her defense. 3 years of mentorship, and when it mattered most, his silence spoke louder than any rejection. The rest happened quickly. A brief meeting with human resources. Phrases like restructuring and budget constraints, and contract not renewed. They gave her a box for her belongings and 30 minutes to clear her desk. Just like that, 3 years evaporated into nothing. Vivian walked out of that building with her head held high. She refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. She kept her shoulders straight and her expression neutral. She walked past the reception desk, past the security guard who had greeted her every morning for 3 years, past the revolving doors and out into the night, and then the sky opened up. The rain started softly at first, a gentle mist that clung to her skin and hair, but within minutes it became a downpour, the kind of rain that doesn't just fall but attacks, the kind that blurs the world into streaks of color and washes away any pretense of control. Vivian stood on the sidewalk, clutching her box of belongings, and felt something inside her finally crack. She thought about her mother, 62 years old and still working double shifts as a nurse because Vivian had promised her she would make it. She would succeed. She would give her the retirement she deserved. She thought about her younger brother, Daniel, 23, and watching his big sister like she had all the answers, like she had figured out the secret to life that kept eluding him. She thought about her father, gone now for 10 years, but his voice still echoed in her memory. You're going to do great things, Vivi. I believe in you. How was she supposed to tell them? How was she supposed to explain that she had failed? That all the sacrifices, all the belief, all the hope they had placed in her had amounted to nothing? The rain soaked through her blazer. It ruined the carefully styled hair she had spent an hour perfecting. It mixed with the tears she couldn't hold back anymore, washing them away before anyone could see. Her phone was dead. Her wallet held barely enough cash for a cab, and she was standing in the middle of the city, drowning in rain and despair, wondering how everything had fallen apart so quickly. That's when she saw the car. A sleek black vehicle slowed near the curb. In the blur of rain and streetlights, it looked like salvation. It looked like escape. She didn't care about the logo, or the make, or the model. She didn't notice the subtle details that would have told her this was no ordinary cab. She just needed to get home. She needed to be somewhere safe, where she could fall apart in private. Without hesitation, she yanked open the back door and threw herself inside, tossing her box of belongings onto the seat beside her. Downtown, Madison Avenue. Please just drive. Her voice was sharp, clipped, the voice of someone who had used up all her patience hours ago. She didn't look at the driver. She didn't offer a greeting or a please or a thank you. She just pulled her soaking coat tighter around her body and stared out the window at the blurred lights passing by. The man in the driver's seat glanced at her through the rearview mirror. He saw a woman on the edge, wet hair plastered to her face, mascara beginning to smudge beneath her eyes, shoulders carrying a weight that had become too heavy to bear. He saw pain, real pain, the kind that doesn't come from a bad day, but from a shattered dream. And he said nothing. He simply nodded once, put the car in drive, and pulled away from the curb. His name was Marcus Elliott Vance, though she wouldn't learn that until later. At 36 years old, Marcus had built Vance Capital into one of the most influential investment firms in the country. His net worth was measured in billions. His name appeared in Forbes and Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal. He had shaken hands with presidents and dined with royalty. But tonight, none of that mattered. Tonight, Marcus was driving himself through the rain because sometimes even billionaires need to escape their own lives. He had spent the day in meetings that felt meaningless, surrounded by people who wanted something from him, listening to pitches from entrepreneurs who saw him as nothing more than a checkbook with a heartbeat. He had everything the world said a person should want: money, power, success, and yet he felt emptier than he had in years. So he had dismissed his driver, climbed behind the wheel of his own car, and driven aimlessly through the city, searching for something he couldn't name. He hadn't planned to stop for anyone. He wasn't even paying attention when the woman appeared at the curb, drenched and desperate. But something made him slow down. Something made him stop. And now, here she was, a stranger in his back seat, treating him like hired help, ordering him around without a second glance. Anyone else might have corrected her, might have taken offense, might have revealed who he was just to watch her squirm with embarrassment. But Marcus did none of those things, because in her voice, beneath the sharpness and the commands, he heard something familiar. He heard the sound of someone who had been beaten down by life and was trying desperately not to show it. He knew that sound. He had lived it once, a long time ago, before the money, before the success, when he was just a kid from the wrong side of town with nothing but dreams and determination. So he drove, and he listened. The silence lasted for exactly 4 minutes. Vivian counted them on the dashboard clock, watching the green numbers change while rain streaked down the windows. Then the dam broke. Do you ever feel like no matter what you do, no matter how hard you try, it's never enough? She wasn't really asking him. She was asking the universe. She was asking the unfairness of existence itself. But the words came out directed at the back of his head, at this stranger who had become an unwitting witness to her unraveling. I gave them everything. 3 years of my life. I worked harder than anyone in that building. I stayed late. I came early. I sacrificed weekends and holidays and relationships. I gave them every single piece of myself that I had to give. Her voice cracked, but she pushed through it. And you know what they said? Too ambitious. My ideas were too ambitious. As if having vision is some kind of character flaw. Marcus's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. He adjusted his grip, but still he said nothing. Vivian laughed bitterly. I'm sorry. You're just trying to do your job, and here I am dumping my problems on you. You probably deal with crazy passengers all the time. She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing her already ruined makeup. It's just that tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight was supposed to be my moment, and now I have to go home and figure out how to tell my family that I failed, that everything they believed about me was wrong. Through the mirror, Marcus watched her, the way her shoulders shook slightly, the way she was fighting so hard to hold herself together, the way her voice carried the weight of everyone who had ever counted on her. He recognized that weight. He had carried it himself. My mom has been working double shifts for 30 years, Vivian continued, almost to herself. She's 62 and she's exhausted, but she keeps going because I told her I would make it. I told her that one day I would give her the life she deserves. And now. She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. And my brother, Daniel. He looks at me like I have all the answers, like I figured out some secret that keeps eluding him. He dropped out of college last year because he was lost, and I told him it was okay because I would help him find his way. But how am I supposed to help him find his way when I just lost mine? Marcus made a decision. Instead of taking the direct route to Madison Avenue, he turned down a quieter side street. Then another. He avoided the construction zones and the flooded intersections. He chose the smoothest roads, the most peaceful paths. Not because it was faster. It wasn't. But because something told him she wasn't ready to go home yet. Something told him she needed more time in this space, this moving sanctuary of rain and darkness and unexpected safety. Vivian noticed the route change. This isn't the usual way. Smoother roads, he replied simply. Less traffic. It was the first time he had spoken. His voice was low and calm, with a quiet warmth that seemed out of place in a taxi driver. But Vivian was too lost in her own thoughts to analyze it. Okay, she said softly. And for some reason, she believed him. The car moved through the empty streets, windshield wipers beating a steady rhythm against the rain. And something shifted in the atmosphere. The tension in Vivian's shoulders eased slightly. Her breathing slowed. For the first time in hours, she didn't feel like she was drowning. She didn't understand why. She was still unemployed, still facing an impossible conversation with her family, still watching her dreams dissolve in the downpour outside. But somehow, in the back of this stranger's car, she felt safe. Can I tell you something? She asked, not really expecting an answer. I haven't told anyone this. Not my mom, not my brother, not anyone. She paused, gathering courage. My dad died when I was 18, heart attack, completely unexpected. He was fine one day and then he was gone. And the last thing he ever said to me was that he believed in me, that I was going to do great things. Her voice grew thick with emotion. I've spent the last 10 years trying to prove him right, trying to become the person he saw when he looked at me. And tonight I realized that maybe I've been chasing a ghost. Maybe the person he believed in doesn't exist. Maybe I've been pretending to be someone I'm not. And now the truth has finally caught up with me. Marcus felt something tighten in his chest, because he understood more than she could possibly know. He thought about his own father, a man who had worked 3 jobs to put food on the table, a man who had never once complained about his circumstances, but had dreamed of something better for his son, a man who had died of exhaustion when Marcus was 22, before he could see any of his son's success. Marcus had built his empire on the foundation of his father's dreams. Every deal, every acquisition, every billion added to his net worth was a monument to the man who had believed in him when no one else did. He knew what it meant to carry that weight. He knew what it cost. And looking at this woman in his back seat, this stranger who had stumbled into his car by accident, he saw a kindred spirit, someone fighting the same battle he had fought, someone who understood that success wasn't about money or power, but about honoring the people who had sacrificed everything for you. He wanted to speak, to tell her that failure wasn't final, that rejection wasn't a reflection of her worth, that the darkest moments were often the doorways to the brightest futures. But he didn't, because sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone isn't advice. It's presence. It's the simple act of being there without trying to fix anything. So he drove, and he listened, and in the silence between her words, something profound passed between them, something neither of them could name. The car finally slowed to a stop in front of a modest apartment building, red brick facade, clean but worn, the kind of place where people worked hard and hoped for better. Vivian blinked, surprised that the ride was already over. It had felt like minutes and hours at the same time, a strange suspension of reality where the outside world ceased to exist. She looked out the window at her building. Tomorrow, she would have to face reality. She would have to make phone calls and update her resume and figure out how to pay next month's rent. But that was tomorrow. Right now, she was still suspended in this moment. "Thank you," she said softly, "for listening. I know that wasn't part of the job description." She reached into her bag and pulled out her wallet. Her hands fumbled as she counted the crumpled bills inside. Her heart sank. I'm so sorry. I don't have enough." The embarrassment was suffocating. As if tonight hadn't been humiliating enough, now she couldn't even pay for a taxi ride. She felt tears threatening again and fought them back desperately. "I can transfer it tomorrow, I swear. If you give me your account information or a way to contact you, I'll send the rest first thing in the morning. I'm good for it, I promise." The words tumbled out in a rush of shame and desperation. She couldn't even look at him. She just stared at the pathetic handful of bills in her hand, wishing the ground would open up and swallow her whole. "That won't be necessary." His voice cut through her spiral, calm, steady, with an authority that didn't match her assumption of who he was. "What? There's no charge." Vivian finally looked up, really looked at him for the first time since she had gotten into the car. She saw his profile in the dim light of the street lamps. Strong jaw, composed features, the kind of face that commanded attention without demanding it. "I can't just take a free ride, please. Let me pay you back somehow. Consider it handled." There was no condescension in his voice, no pity, just quiet certainty, as if the matter was already settled and there was nothing more to discuss. Vivian felt something shift in her perception. This man didn't sound like a driver. He didn't carry himself like someone who spent his nights ferrying strangers around the city. There was something else there, something she couldn't quite place, but her mind was too exhausted to pursue the thought, so she simply nodded. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." She gathered her box of belongings and reached for the door handle, but something made her pause. Something made her turn back for one last look. "Can I ask you something?" He met her eyes through the rearview mirror, waiting. "Why did you take the long way? And why did you let me talk for all that time without saying anything?" Marcus considered the question. And when he answered, his words carried the weight of someone who had learned them through hard experience. Because sometimes people don't need advice. They need space to hear their own thoughts out loud, and sometimes the fastest route isn't the one that gets you where you need to go. Vivian felt tears prick at her eyes again, but this time they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of something else entirely, something she couldn't name. "You're a very unusual driver," she said softly. A faint smile crossed his features, the first sign of expression she had seen from him all night. "I get that a lot." She stepped out into the rain. It had softened now to a gentle mist, the kind that cools your skin without soaking through. She closed the door behind her and took a few steps toward her building. Then she stopped, because something caught her eye, something she had been too distracted and too upset to notice before. The emblem on the hood of the car. It wasn't the logo of any taxi service. It wasn't the marking of any rideshare company. It was the sleek, unmistakable emblem of a vehicle that cost more than most people made in 5 years. Her breath caught. She turned back to look at the car with new eyes. The custom leather interior, the subtle but undeniable luxury of every detail, the way the engine hummed with a refinement that no ordinary vehicle possessed. This wasn't a taxi. This wasn't even close to a taxi. Her heart began to race as the pieces started falling into place. The confidence, the composure, the way he had listened without servility, the way he had waved the fare like money, was meaningless. She stepped back toward the car just as the window rolled down, and there he was, looking at her with those calm, knowing eyes. "You're not a driver," she said. It wasn't a question. It was a realization spoken aloud. "Are you?" Marcus's lips curved into that subtle smile again. "Not professionally, no." Vivian's mind raced. Embarrassment flooded through her as she remembered every word she had said, every assumption she had made, every moment she had treated him like hired help without a second thought. "Then why didn't you say anything?" He regarded her thoughtfully before answering, "Because you needed someone to listen, and I was there." The simplicity of his answer disarmed her completely. No ego, no superiority, just a matter-of-fact explanation that somehow made perfect sense and no sense at all. "But I didn't even—" She couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't articulate the full weight of her mortification. "You were hurting," he said gently. "When people are hurting, they don't always see clearly. That's not something to apologize for." Before she could respond, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small card. He extended it through the window. "If you ever want to talk about your designs, call this number." Vivian took the card automatically, her fingers brushing against his for the briefest moment. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through her system. She looked down at the card in her hand. Elegant, minimalist, just a name and a phone number embossed in silver against thick cream paper. Vance Capital. The name tugged at something in her memory, something she should recognize but couldn't quite place in her current state of shock. "Wait, what?" She looked up to ask, to demand answers, to understand what was happening. But the window was already sliding closed. The engine purred to life, and before she could form another word, the car pulled away from the curb and disappeared into the misty night. Vivian stood there in the soft rain, card clutched in her hand, world tilting on its axis. She didn't sleep that night. How could she? Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face in the rearview mirror. Calm, observing, understanding. She heard his voice saying words that had somehow cut through everything and touched something real. "You were hurting. When people are hurting, they don't always see clearly. That's not something to apologize for." Who says something like that? Who lets a stranger unload their pain without judgment, without interruption, without asking for anything in return? Around 2 a.m, she finally gave in to the curiosity that had been gnawing at her since she walked through her door. She grabbed her laptop and typed the name from the card into the search bar. Vance Capital. The results loaded instantly, and Vivian felt her breath leave her body. Marcus Elliott Vance, founder and CEO of Vance Capital. Net worth estimated at $4.7 billion. One of the most influential figures in the business world. Known for his reclusive nature and his uncanny ability to identify talent that others overlooked, picture after picture filled her screen. Marcus at charity galas. Marcus shaking hands with politicians and celebrities. Marcus on the cover of Forbes with a headline that read, "The Quiet Titan, How Marcus Vance Built an Empire on Instinct." She read article after article. His origin story was the stuff of legend. Born to working-class parents, father worked himself to death before Marcus turned 23. Mother passed away a year later, heartbroken. Marcus had used his small inheritance to make his first investment, a struggling tech company that everyone else had written off. Within 5 years, that investment had multiplied 1,000-fold. He was famous for his philosophy. He didn't just invest in companies. He invested in people. He had a gift for seeing potential where others saw only risk, for believing in dreamers when the world told them to give up. And this man, this billionaire, this titan of industry, had spent his night driving a broken stranger home, listening to her pour out her pain, asking nothing in return. Vivian sat back in her chair and let the truth wash over her. She had mistaken a billionaire for a taxi driver. She had ordered him around without a second glance. She had vented her frustrations and her failures to him like he was no one of consequence. And he had said nothing. He had simply listened. He had taken the long way home so she would have time to speak. He had refused payment with the casual ease of someone who had never worried about money a day in his life. Then he had given her his card, told her to call if she wanted to discuss her designs. Why? Why would someone like Marcus Vance care about someone like her? The question kept her awake until dawn painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. And when the sun finally rose on a new day, Vivian realized something had shifted inside her. For the first time since walking out of that boardroom, she didn't feel like a failure. She felt seen. If you have ever felt invisible, like you're fighting battles that no one else can see, like your dreams are too big for the people around you to understand, drop a comment below. Share your story, because you're not alone. And sometimes the moment when you feel most overlooked is actually the moment when the right person is finally paying attention. Don't forget to hit that like button if this story is speaking to you. 3 days passed. 3 days of staring at that card. 3 days of picking up her phone and putting it back down. 3 days of arguing with herself. He probably gives out cards like this all the time. He was just being polite. Why would a billionaire want to hear about my designs? He was probably already forgotten about me by the time he got home. But there was another voice too. A quieter voice that remembered the way he had looked at her, the sincerity in his words, the weight behind his invitation. If you ever want to talk about your designs, call this number. Not if you need a job, not if you want an investment. If you want to talk about your designs, as if her work was worth discussing, as if her vision mattered. On the 4th day, her mother called. "You sound different," Rosa Ashford said, with the intuition that only mothers possess. Something happened. What is it? Vivian considered lying, considered protecting her mother from the truth of her failure. But something had changed in her since that night. Something had shifted. "I lost my job, Mom." Silence on the other end of the line. Then a soft exhale. "I see. And how do you feel about that?" It wasn't the response Vivian expected. She had braced herself for disappointment, for worry, for the careful management of expectations that had defined their relationship since her father died. "I feel, oh." She searched for the right word. "I feel lost, but also free, like something needed to break so something new could grow. Does that make any sense?" Her mother laughed softly. "More sense than you know, my love. Your father said something similar when he quit his first job. The job everyone told him he was crazy to leave. He said sometimes God closes doors we're too afraid to close ourselves." Vivian felt tears prick at her eyes. "I miss him." "I know, sweetheart. But he's still with you. Every time you take a chance, every time you trust your instincts, that's his gift to you." After they hung up, Vivian sat in silence for a long time. Then she picked up her phone, dialed the number on the card, and waited. It rang twice. Then his voice came through the line, as calm and steady as she remembered. "Hello? Hi, this is... I don't know if you remember me, but..." "Vivian." Her heart stopped. He remembered her name. "I've been hoping you'd call." 4 words. That's all it took to change the course of her entire life. They met at a small cafe in the quieter part of the city. No photographers, no fanfare, just 2 people sitting across from each other in a corner booth. while rain tapped gently against the windows. Vivian had brought her portfolio, every design she had ever been proud of, including the ones that had been rejected. Especially the ones that had been rejected. She laid them out on the table between them like a confession. Marcus studied each one with careful attention. He didn't rush. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He examined every detail, every line, every annotation she had made in the margins. He asked questions that showed he understood not just architecture, but the philosophy behind her choices. When he finished, he looked up at her with an expression that made her breath catch. "These are extraordinary." Vivian blinked. "What?" "I've seen thousands of designs. I've invested in dozens of architectural firms, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that these are some of the most innovative, most human-centered concepts I've ever encountered." She couldn't speak. The words she had longed to hear for years were suddenly reality, and she didn't know what to do with them. "You don't just design buildings," he continued. "You design experiences. You understand that architecture isn't about structures, it's about how people feel when they move through space. It's about the memories they create, the lives they live. That's a rare gift, Vivian, an extraordinarily rare gift." She found her voice. "Then why did they reject me?" Marcus leaned back in his chair, considering the question. "Because vision threatens people who've stopped having their own. Your designs aren't safe. They're revolutionary. And revolutionary ideas terrify those who've built their careers on playing it safe." "So what am I supposed to do? Play it safe just to fit in?" "No." His answer was immediate and firm. "You're supposed to find people who see what you see, people who aren't afraid of the future." He paused, then slid a folder across the table toward her. "I'm launching a new division within Vance Capital, a development company focused on sustainable human-centered housing, affordable communities that don't sacrifice beauty for budget, spaces that transform how people live." Vivian's hands trembled slightly as she opened the folder. Inside were project outlines, budgets, timelines, a vision that aligned so perfectly with her own that it felt like reading her own dreams put to paper. "And I want you to lead the design team." She looked up sharply. "Me? You barely know me." "I know enough. You know that I broke down in the back of your car and treated you like a taxi driver." A ghost of a smile crossed his features. "I know that in your lowest moment, when you had every reason to give up, you were still thinking about the people who depend on you. Your mother, your brother. I know that your designs show not just technical skill but deep empathy for human experience. I know that you've been underestimated your entire career, and instead of becoming bitter, you've become more determined. I know that the people the world overlooks are often the ones who change it the most." Vivian felt tears threatening to fall. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I've been where you are, sitting across from someone who held my future in their hands, wondering if I was crazy to dream so big, and someone believed in me when they had no reason to. It changed everything, and now it's my turn to do the same." She was quiet for a long moment, processing, allowing herself to believe that this was real. "Can I have some time to think about it?" "Take all the time you need." "But Vivian," he leaned forward slightly, "trust your instincts. They've carried you this far. They won't fail you now." She didn't sleep much that week either, but this time it wasn't from despair. It was from hope so fierce it felt like fire in her veins. She talked to her mother again, told her everything, about the car ride, about Marcus, about the opportunity that had materialized from the wreckage of her lowest night. "What do you think I should do?" Rosa Ashford laughed warmly through the phone. "Sweetheart, I think you already know. You've known since the moment you got into that car. The question isn't what you should do. It's whether you're brave enough to do it." She talked to her brother Daniel, who had never heard her sound so alive. "Vivi, this is incredible. This guy sounds like some kind of guardian angel or something." "He's just a man, Danny. A very perceptive, very successful man, who happened to be in the right place at the right time." "There's no such thing as coincidence," Daniel said with the certainty of youth. "You know what Dad used to say. The universe puts people in your path for a reason. Maybe this is yours." 6 days after their cafe meeting, Vivian called Marcus. Yes. One word, but it contained multitudes. Hope, courage, trust, the willingness to leap into the unknown because staying safe had stopped being an option. "Yes," she said again, more firmly. "I'm in." Marcus's voice carried a warmth she hadn't heard before, Good. Then let's change the world. Have you ever had a moment when everything shifted? When a door opened that you didn't even know existed? Share it in the comments. I want to hear about the moments that changed your life. And if you're enjoying this story, hit that like button. Your support means more than you know. The months that followed were the most challenging and most fulfilling of Vivian's life. She threw herself into the work with an intensity that surprised even her. The Vance Community Initiative became her mission, her purpose, her reason for getting up every morning. She assembled a team of like-minded architects and designers who shared her vision. She pushed boundaries and questioned assumptions and refused to compromise on the things that mattered. And Marcus was there, through every late night and early morning, through every setback and breakthrough. He wasn't a micromanager. He gave her space to lead, to create, to make mistakes and learn from them. But he was always present, always believing, always seeing the best in her, even when she struggled to see it in herself. Their relationship evolved organically. What began as professional collaboration deepened into something neither of them had anticipated. It started with late-night conversations that wandered far from work. Marcus shared pieces of himself he had never shared with anyone. The loneliness that came with his success, the walls he had built to protect himself from people who only saw his wealth, the fear that he would never find someone who loved him for who he was rather than what he had. You know what the hardest part of having money is? He asked one evening as they worked late in his office, takeout containers scattered across the desk between them. It's never knowing if anyone sees you, the real you, or just the number attached to your name. Vivian set down her chopsticks and looked at him with the directness that had become one of her defining traits. Is that why you were driving yourself around that night, trying to be invisible for once? He nodded slowly. I do it more often than you'd think. Put on different clothes, drive my own car, walk through parts of the city where nobody knows my name. It's the only time I feel like a person instead of a portfolio. And then some random woman jumps in your car and treats you like a servant. No. His voice was gentle. A woman in pain climbed into my car and trusted me with her story. There's a difference. Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding that went deeper than words. You saw me, Vivian said softly. That night, when I couldn't see myself at all, you saw me. I recognized you, he corrected, because I had been you, lost and scared and pretending to be stronger than I felt. When I looked at you in that rearview mirror, I saw every struggle I had ever faced looking back at me. How could I not stop? How could I not listen? Most people wouldn't have. Most people are too busy protecting themselves to notice when someone else is drowning. He paused. But the thing I've learned, the thing that building all of this has taught me, is that real strength isn't about protection, it's about connection. It's about seeing someone and being seen in return. Vivian felt tears sliding down her cheeks, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of recognition, of coming home to something she hadn't known she was searching for. I see you, she whispered. Not the billionaire, not the investor, just you. Marcus reached across the desk and took her hand. The contact was electric, gentle, more intimate than any grand gesture could have been. I know, he said. That's why I've been waiting for you. 1 year to the day after that rainy night, Vivian stood on the rooftop of her first completed project, the Ashford Community Center, named in honor of her father, affordable housing that proved beauty and budget could coexist, a space designed not just to shelter people, but to inspire them, to remind them that they deserved beauty in their lives regardless of their circumstances. The city sprawled below her in a tapestry of lights and shadows, and beside her stood Marcus, the man who had driven her home when she was lost and stayed to watch her find herself. You did this, he said, gesturing to the building beneath them. This vision, this reality, it came from you. Vivian shook her head. I couldn't have done any of it without you. Yes, you could have. Maybe not as quickly, maybe not on this scale, but you would have found a way. That's who you are, a force of nature that doesn't know how to quit. She turned to face him, taking his hands in hers. You changed my life. You know that, right? That night, when everything fell apart, you put me back together without even trying. No. His voice was soft, but certain. I didn't put you back together. I just gave you the space to remember that you were never broken. Bruised, maybe, tired, but never broken. Why? The question she had been carrying since that first night finally surfaced. Why me? Out of everyone in the city that night, why did you stop for me? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching her face as if looking for the right words. Because when you got into that car, you didn't see a rich man or a poor man. You just saw a driver, someone to get you from one place to another. And in that moment, I wasn't Marcus Vance, billionaire. I was just a man. It had been so long since anyone looked at me without seeing dollar signs that I had forgotten what it felt like. He paused, his thumb tracing gentle circles on the back of her hand. And then you started talking about your dreams and your fears and the people you love. And I realized that you weren't just some stranger in my car. You were a mirror showing me everything I had lost touch with. Ambition that comes from love, not greed. Fear that comes from caring, not weakness. And a refusal to give up, even when the world tells you to. I treated you like you didn't matter, Vivian said, the old shame resurfacing. You treated me like a human being who was doing a job. That's more than most people offer me. At least you weren't trying to impress me or use me or manipulate me. You were just real, painfully, beautifully real. He reached up to cup her face in his hands. I've been waiting my whole life for someone to see past the car and the buildings and the bank accounts. Someone who would love me even if I lost it all tomorrow. And there you were sitting in my back seat seeing nothing but a man who could help you get home. And now? Vivian asked, her voice barely a whisper. Now I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, with exactly who I'm supposed to be with. He kissed her then, softly, tenderly, a kiss that was a promise and a homecoming, all at once. And Vivian, the woman who had mistaken a millionaire for a taxi driver, finally understood something she had been searching for her entire life. Home wasn't a place. It wasn't a building, or an address, or a set of coordinates on a map. Home was being seen, being known, being loved not for what you could offer, but for who you truly were. She had found that home in the most unlikely place, in the back of a stranger's car, on the worst night of her life, with a man who had the power to have everything but chose instead to sit in silence and listen to a broken woman put herself back together one word at a time. Sometimes life works that way. Sometimes the universe puts people in your path at exactly the moment you need them. Not the moment you expect, not the moment you planned for, but the exact right moment. The question is whether you're paying attention, whether you're open to the possibility that help might come in an unexpected form, whether you're brave enough to trust the process, even when everything seems to be falling apart. Vivian had almost missed it. She had almost let her pain blind her to the miracle sitting right in front of her. But something had made her talk. Something had made her trust. Something had made her reach out when every instinct told her to shut down. And because of that, her life had changed forever. 2 years after that rooftop moment, Vivian's name was known throughout the architectural world. Her designs graced the covers of international publications. Her philosophy of human-centered, emotionally resonant spaces had sparked a movement in the industry. But more important than any of that, she had kept her promises. Her mother Rosa had finally retired. She lived in a beautiful apartment that Vivian had designed specifically for her, with gardens and light and all the peace she had earned through decades of sacrifice. Her brother Daniel had found his way. Inspired by Vivian's journey, he had gone back to school, studied social work, dedicated himself to helping young people who felt lost and hopeless find their paths. And Marcus, the man who had started it all by simply being in the right place at the right time, had found something he never knew he was missing. A partner, a collaborator, a home. They built their life together on the same foundation that had connected them from the beginning. Authenticity, presence, the willingness to see and be seen. They never forgot that rainy night. The assumptions made, the silence kept, the moment when a dismissive command turned into an unexpected salvation. In fact, they told the story often, at dinner parties and charity events and quiet evenings at home, not to impress people with its romance, but to remind them of its truth. The people we overlook might be exactly the ones we need. The moments when everything falls apart might be the moments when everything comes together, and the strangers we dismiss without a second thought might just be carrying the answers we've been searching for all along. So, here's the question I want to leave you with tonight. Who are you overlooking? What assumptions are you making about the people around you? What miracles might you be missing because you're too caught up in your own pain to see clearly? And here's the flip side. What if you're the one being overlooked? What if somewhere out there, someone is waiting to see you the way Marcus saw Vivian? What if your darkest moment is actually the doorway to everything you've ever wanted? Don't give up. Don't stop dreaming. Don't let the rejections and the setbacks and the closed doors convince you that your story is over, because it's not even close. She mistook a millionaire for a taxi driver. He said nothing, and he drove her home. But here's what nobody expected. That ride didn't just get her home to her apartment. It got her home to herself, to her purpose, to the love she didn't know she was looking for. And that's the thing about unexpected journeys. They rarely take you where you plan to go, but they always take you exactly where you need to be. If this story touched your heart, if it made you think about your own assumptions, your own struggles, your own potential for unexpected miracles, then I need you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button. Join this community of dreamers and believers and people who refuse to give up on happy endings. Leave a comment telling me what part of this story resonated with you most. Was it Vivian's courage? Marcus's quiet compassion? The moment when everything changed? Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message tonight. Someone who's feeling overlooked. Someone who's wondering if their dreams will ever come true. Because on this channel, we believe in love. We believe in second chances. We believe that the right people will always find each other, even in the most unlikely circumstances. This has been Mr. Andy Love Stories, and I will see you in the next one. Until then, keep your eyes open, keep your heart ready, and never stop believing that your miracle might be just one rainy night away.